Welcome to the Emotional Eating Unwrapped podcast. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, an emotional eating and weight loss coach for women looking to fall in love with eating, create healthy attachments with food, and lose weight sustainably. Hello and welcome to another new episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, and if you have ever felt like your relationship with food was less about nourishment and more about control, this episode today is for you because we're going to talk about food as a vehicle for feeling in control and when eating becomes a substitute for that feeling of stability and grounding that we want in our life. So if you're like, this is me, I approach food this way, then you're going to really like this episode because I'm going to go into why we do this and also some tips and some mindset reframes about how we can approach it a bit differently. So make sure you stay till the end for that piece of it. All right, so here's the thing. Food is control, right? When life feels chaotic, when things feel out of our control, food can feel like the one thing that we can manage. And I've talked about this before, that we have been conditioned just by virtue of being human, right? Like when we were young and we would feel like emotional or there would be unrest in our nervous system as babies, right? We wouldn't have said that as babies, but that's what's going on and we're crying and all this stuff. What happened, right? Our mother gave us her breast or we got a bottle, we got food. So we have this neurological wiring that food is something that is going to control the environment when things feel chaotic. And we have been trained that it is predictable and that it's always there. And the thing with food as we get older, why we still choose it is because it doesn't talk back, it doesn't leave, it doesn't change the rules. Right? So that's why when we become adults, we still turn to food as the place where we try to find control. And therefore, when our lives as adults start to feel out of control, like our relationships, work, family, the weight of just everyday stress starts to create some internal chaos, food becomes the thing that we grab onto to feel stable. But here's the thing we don't realize until you're listening to this podcast or you've started to dive deeper into, some of this neurobiological work that I talk about on this podcast and some of the work I do in, my programs. Food only gives us the illusion of stability, right? It doesn't actually create a solve for the chaos. It just numbs the moment temporarily. And when that temporary fix fades, we're not only left with the same instability we were trying to escape in the first place, but we also don't even have a deeper connection to ourselves, right? So we walk away with the same instability and a more severed relationship to ourselves because we've missed out on the opportunity to become more intimate with what's really going on inside of us. Instead, we chose to numb and find, a false sense of control with food. So why does food become a stand-in for control? Why is that a pattern that we get stuck in? And how can we start to reclaim a sense of real stability, real grounding in our life? So like I said before, life is unpredictable, right? But food is easy. It's predictable. It's certain, right? We know that if we go to food, we're not going to get attitude back. We know what it's going to taste like unless, somehow it's spoiled or whatever it is, it's something that randomly disappoints. But there's some sort of predictable outcome that we know we are going to receive, which, calms our nervous system, right? So that's food. But then there's the sense of control that we also can use our relationship towards food to feel. So the example of that is some people find control in restriction, right? Some people feel a sense of control when they're restricting, right? Meticulously counting calories, like eliminating entire food groups, just kind of hypervigilance around food, making it more complicated than it is. And what happens here is that instead of focusing on like life and, what really is going on emotionally inside of us, or like a conflict or a relationship that's not going well, or an energetic misalignment, we focus on the behaviors around eating because we could say to ourselves, at least I have control over this, right? It might not even be a conscious thing that you're saying out loud to yourself, but your brain is much more willing to hyper-focus on these kind of minutia about food rather than kind of deal with the other stuff that's going on, right? Others, when it comes to this dynamic, turn to food for comfort, seeking relief in food because it's the only thing in life that feels soothing. Okay, so when it comes to food, let's just repeat for a second. Food in and of itself is predictable because it doesn't talk back. We know what we're going to get with food, right? That's why. But then there's the behaviors that we have with food. And some people are more prone to restriction, where because they feel in control, right? There's order to that. And other people are more on the indulging side, like the emotional eating side, because what they're looking for isn't necessarily control and order. They're looking for soothing. And sometimes you can be a combination of both. Okay. And I particularly myself have been on both sides of this. There were times when I felt like I had to be perfect with food. I was in a measuring, tracking, controlling every bite. I would have a running, list of how many calories I had that day because it made me feel productive, right? It made me feel like I was productive. It was like I was proving something to myself. I felt like I was doing it. I was doing something. Productive is really the best way I could say. And then there were times where I felt like, everything was falling apart, or the emotions and the heaviness and the relational conflicts were too big, that food became my escape hatch, right? Like that, then I would turn to food for soothing. I would turn to food to numb. I would turn to food because it was this predictable feeling of goodness that I would get for just a moment though, right? But that's what happens with chronic emotional eating and binging, is that we just do it more because the moment's so short that we just want to collect longer moments. So we just continue to eat. That's what binging is, right? It's like binging is the moment ends so soon that we just do more of it. And then we start to, get into this cycle where we get this false sense of soothing, this false sense of control, right? So if we look at the cycle with, if we look at the illusion when it comes to restricting, what happens here is that it can feel really empowering at first, right? Like and that's what happens a lot when people start like a macro counting program. It feels really empowering. It feels like, I have my macros. I know what to follow. I have, these macro meals, and like, I just have to follow them. And I feel this like puffed sense of self that I'm being healthy. I'm in control ultimately, right? Like I could say no to this because my macros told me so. And like, this isn't me dieting. This is like, I'm really in power. But over time, your body starts to fight back because your body knows that it's not the one that's in control. That these food and eating decisions are not coming from a place of true self-trust. They're not coming from a place of honoring your true desires and making self-honoring eating decisions where, where you could walk away feeling like a true inner sense of empowerment, right? Your body knows that. Your body knows eventually that your eating decisions are externally motivated. So what happens is that hunger cues intensify, cravings become like overwhelming, the food noise becomes really, really loud, and then suddenly out of nowhere, you find yourself like in a binge. And when that happens, it feels like you failed. And if you are somebody who is in this restricting mentality, you're most likely a perfectionist. And so feeling like you failed is like, the fall down to the bottom is very, very fast. And it feels like all of that control just slipped through your fingers. It's really hard to slow down and to find middle ground. And that's why we find ourselves in this restricting binging cycle a lot, kind of continuing to go back to the cycle until you stop the cycle, where it constantly feels like, I'm in a diet program, I'm in accounting, a macro accounting program, it's all good, I'm losing weight, it's all great. And then it's binge. And then it's binge, weight gain, rock bottom, go back to the macro thing again, right? It's like same thing over and over again. And on the flip side, when you overeat, right? Like when you are looking for food as the soothing, the numbing, the reason why we're doing this a lot of the time, and I think this is something that it's really important to recognize, is that it feels like you're taking something back. I remember what it felt like to be stuck in the cycle of emotional eating. I tried every diet out there, counting, tracking, restricting, but nothing ever worked. Food controlled my life, my thoughts, and I constantly felt guilty after eating. But once I learned how to heal the emotional triggers behind my eating and trust my body, everything changed. I stopped obsessing over food, the weight started coming off naturally, and I found real freedom in how I ate and lived. So I created the Sober Eating year-long mentorship to help other women experience the same transformation. So you can stop battling with food, you can lose weight without deprivation, and you can feel confident in your body again. In this mentorship, you'll have access to my proven nervous system rewiring method. You'll have access to live coaching with me, weekly accountability, and a community of women who truly understand your journey. You'll also have free access to my signature programs, the Emotional Eating Solution and Decoding Permanent Weight Loss, valued at $2,000. Click the link in the show notes to explore the mentorship today. You don't have to do this alone. I'll be right there with you every step of the way. And I really want you to think about that. Because a lot of times when we binge or when we use food as an emotional coping mechanism or try to numb, it's because there's some sort of trauma. There's different degrees of trauma, obviously. Like it can feel traumatic to be in a conflict in a relationship, or to feel like you're not being seen, or to feel like you're not being heard. That can feel like a trauma. So a lot of times when we are in a situation where we feel small or invisible, whether or not that's because of what someone else did, or whether or not it's, we're abandoning ourselves, so to speak, we overeat because it feels like we are taking something back and we are saying, I matter, I am visible. Right? It's like you're allowing yourself to take up space. You're taking up the space in yourself, like with food. Instead of taking up space, you're creating physically, you're kind of stuffing. So there's a difference between taking up space from a place of self-worth and stuffing yourself to take up space. But until we see and really feel the difference, you can continue to do this behavior of overeating and binging, because unconsciously and subconsciously what you really want is to take your power back. But what happens is like when you do it with food, by like saying, I take my power back, so I'm going to stuff myself with all this food, shame creeps in, because it's not really self-honoring to do that, right? And then there's the regret. And then suddenly you feel less soothed and less in control than before. And so this cycle, this restrict, the binge cycle, it just continues to perpetuate the chaos that you were trying to escape in the first place. And understanding this, really internalizing this, doing the deep work, shifted everything for me. And this simple statement of food isn't the problem, like there's one thing to know it and there's one thing to embody that, right? But once you understand the shift that food isn't the problem, it's just the placeholder. It's just standing in for something deeper that you're really craving, right? What you're really craving is emotional safety, stability, control over your own life. And so what we really want to do, what you really want to start asking yourself is, how do I stop emotionally overeating and using food in these ways, or exploiting food in these ways, right? So it's, how do I stop doing that? But also, what am I actually searching for? Right? Getting clear on that, because that is then how you can reclaim true stability, right? That's how you can reclaim true stability, because the truth of the matter is that food is just food. It's not chaos, right? Food is not chaotic. Food is not complicated, right? And food isn't control. And eating behaviors, and eating is not meant to be a vehicle for control or chaos either. Right? Eating is a behavior that we do as humans to live, and food is fuel for your body. And when you stop giving it the responsibility of being your stabilizer, of meeting your emotional needs, you open up the space to find real stability within yourself. So let's talk about what that would look like. I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions and some things that I have done in my life to help me with that, because it's what helped me to stop in my own life using food and eating as a sense of control and a sense of emotional safety. So the first thing I'll suggest is you want to build routines that ground you. The reason food feels so stabilizing is because it's predictable, right? But you yourself can create real, authentic predictability in your life through routines that support you, not control you. The thing is with routines is that you can't just write them down in a calendar. You actually have to do them for them to create this stability. And sometimes it can be a bit of a heavy lift to start doing it, right? Which is why, having support around that and having consistency around that is really helpful. It's something that I offer in my sober eating mentorship, because starting and creating consistency around new mindsets and routines and habits is really hard to do alone. Okay, but that is, that's really important, because the more structure you build in the ways that serve you, and it's really something that you need to know about yourself, right? Someone else's routine is not going to work for you, right? So Somebody can give you their routine in some sort of, basic program to follow. But like, if that doesn't work for you, your body's going to rebel. You need to grow a routine within yourself, start really small, one thing, be consistent. And the more structure you build in ways that serve you, the less you need food to fill that role of structure. Okay, the second thing you want to do is create safe spaces in your life. Okay, food feels safe because, like I said earlier, it doesn't ask anything of you. It doesn't judge. It's just there. So you really need to create the relationships and the environments that give you that same safety. So it's super important that you understand, your needs, your values, like you do that, you do that deep work to understand what you need to create emotional safety for yourself, to feel emotionally supported, right? Because then when you create a safe space and you have relationships and environments that give you the same safety as food, you're not going to feel like you need to be perfect all the time. You're not going to feel like everything is all or nothing or life and death. You're not going to feel like you need to control everything to be okay. You'll be able to be with some emotional discomfort because you've created safe spaces for yourself. And then you want to learn how to practice self-compassion. And this is something that I repeat over and over again in the mentorship with the women in it, is practicing self-compassion, that I even have an entire section of nervous system rewiring session, meditation, self-compassion sessions with affirmations, because one of the hardest part of breaking free from emotional eating is realizing that you will have moments when you turn to food. And that's okay, right? So you will have moments when it's not perfect. You will have moments like I do, right? I still turn to food sometimes. I just don't judge myself for it, and I don't let myself go to the dark place where I stuff myself and I try to use food to create emotional safety or take my power back, right? I'm able to meet myself with kindness. I'm able to pause. I'm able to not shame myself. I'm able to, instead of spiraling, ask myself what I really need in this moment and not let it go too far, right? Because at the end of the day, like I said in the beginning, we have been neurobiologically wired to, relate to food from a place of, sensation. And there is an emotional connection we have to food. And that is something that's fine. We don't need to be like, robotic with food, but we don't want it to be the one in the driver's seat, right? We don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're not the ones that are in control. And self-compassion and having the practice of self-compassion really, really in the forefront of your toolkit, your emotional toolkit, is huge. It's huge for recovering from emotional eating, and it's huge for being able to continue to have an emotional relationship with food that doesn't feel like it controls you or that it's going to overwhelm you, okay? And so if you're listening to this and you are, again, thinking, this is me, I don't know how to feel stable without food, I want you to know that you're not alone. There's so many people, including me, that have felt this way for such a long time. And the thing is it takes time, patience, and support to really detangle yourself from these ingrained behaviors, beliefs, reactions, right? This is all like nervous system stuff and belief stuff, and you don't have to figure it out overnight, right? This process is not about never turning to food for comfort, right? It's not about never, it's not about never turning to food again, right? Like I still have a frustrating conversation or, a disappointing relational exchange with someone, and I come home and sometimes I'll go to the cabinet and have some, Sour Patch Kids. Watermelon Sour Patch Kids are like my favorite thing, right? That's for sure an emotional thing. But I don't black out or numb out and eat the whole thing trying to escape something, right? I am fully aware that I know that I'm like doing it. So, I do it responsibly. And I also ask myself what I'm really needing in the moment. And I give myself what I need in the moment while maybe I'm doing this. And then I put the food away and I give myself more of the non-food stuff in the moment. Okay. And doing that for years now, I've learned to trust myself, right? I've learned to be able to engage with food in this way that's, that allows me to sometimes tap it for, for pleasure, for like emotional, like, stuff. But it's not my anchor. I can handle chaos. I can have chaos in life, and I don't turn to food, right? I don't feel like I need to hyper focus on calories and macros and all these different things in order to feel productive or in control over my weight or overeating, right? Like I trust in my own choices with eating and food and know that I will put up a boundary with myself if need be. And I know that it's coming from a compassionate, self-loving place. Okay. So I hope this episode resonated with you today. This is something that a lot of people, and women specifically struggle with, feeling in control, feeling like they have to be perfect, feeling like, we're not entitled to feeling safe emotionally, we're scared of trusting. And so, we use food in these ways to get our needs met. And I just want you to know that it does not have to be this way. So as always, I'm wishing you an amazing week full of grace, full of self-compassion, self-love. And, the journey of healing is not about being perfect. It's not about getting it right every time. It's about being willing to continue to try and, keep moving forward. So until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped.